My name is Laura Petty, and I play the clarinet in the Sarasota Orchestra. I've been asked to do a little video for you guys. So my video is about scales. And they picked the right person because I love scales. And I know a lot of your teachers, a lot of your band directors, anyone who knows anything about music, this is one of the first things they're going to ask of you. Please learn your scales. And then, why? Why should I learn scales? Well, scales are the Legos of music. So you guys have probably played Legos, right? You got one Lego, got one little block. You want to build something. So you get lots of Legos and you put them together and you build something. Scales are those building blocks of music, just like Legos are building blocks for a Lego Baby Yoda. Now, another good sort of explanation is if you want to build a building, let's say, and you want to be a fabulous musician, or you want to play the Mozart Flute Concerto, or you want to play the Copland Clarinet Concerto, then you need to build a building. And the top floor of that building is the Mozart Concerto or the Copland Concerto. But you can't start building at the top. You can't build the 5th floor or the 10th floor before you build the foundation. Foundation. So you have to dig a big hole in the ground. You have to fill it with cement, rebar. You have to do all sorts of stuff, right? Then you can build your 1st floor. Then you can build your 2nd floor. Then your 3rd. So you're just building. So your scales are the basement of your building. Okay? That is why you need to know them. What is a scale anyway, right? What we're going to be talking today is the major scale. Now there's lots of different scales. There are 12 different major scales. There are lots of different minor scales. You actually have more than one minor scale per key signature. I won't go into all that because you will learn that later. So we're going to be talking about major scales today. And a scale is just a set of 8 notes, including the octave, in a particular pattern. Now I'm going to play a major scale for you so you know the sound of it. It's kind of a happy scale that we hear all the time. So that's your major scale, okay? But before teaching you the major scale, I want to talk about one more scale that is a little bit of a building block for the pattern for a major scale, and that is your chromatic scale. So the chromatic scale encompasses the whole instrument, and it plays every single note that the instrument has to offer. So it goes up by half step until whatever range you decide. You can start small, just 1 octave, so go from C to C, and there'll be 12 notes in there. And you can go all the way up 3, 4 octaves, depending on what instrument you're playing. So this is every single note on the clarinet, going up by half steps. Okay? This scale is everywhere. Every piece you play, every cadenza you learn, every band piece you ever see, it's all over the place. I use it as a warm-up. So the first thing I play every day is a chromatic scale. And sometimes I play it really long to make a long tone. And sometimes I do it to warm up my fingers. So that's made up of half steps, okay? So a major scale, let's return to our scale, has a series of intervals. And it goes whole step, half step, whole step, half step. A whole step is 2 half steps put together. Now you may say to yourself, gosh, let me write this down, or how am I going to remember that? What does that mean? Well, don't worry about it. I'm just letting you know that's what it is. But you don't have to remember the pattern if you have a key signature and what note the scale starts on. But I just wanted to describe what a scale was. Now, there are several references that you may have for your scales. A lot of teachers and band directors give out a sheet with all the scales listed. There are also many, many method books. This is one, because I play clarinet, I know the clarinet method books. This is a nice one for clarinet. Now it has in every key, it has the scale first, and then it has a set of exercises to follow that I'll talk about in a little bit. So there are lots of method books that you can use to learn your scales. When I teach students, I am very firm that they need to memorize their scales. When you memorize something, you know it so much more than reading it on the page. And the reason you're learning your scales is so that you have easy access to that information when you're reading music or when you're sight reading or when you're learning a piece. In other words, you don't want to reinvent the wheel every time you see it. You want to memorize these scales. And it sounds intimidating, but really you need two pieces of information to know your scales. You need to know what note it starts on and what's in the key signature. So that, the pattern that I referenced, the whole step, half step, whole step, half step, that is the major scale pattern. That is not needed by you because the key signature lets you know what notes constitute that pattern. So when you memorize your scales, you just need to know those two pieces of information. So if I know that my scale, my G major scale, starts on G and has one sharp, and it's F sharp, then I know that as I go up the alphabet, I only need to remember that one sharp. So I start on G. What's the next note on in the alphabet? A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. Okay? Now, if I was to be learning this for the first time, what I would do is I would say the note names and then do the fingerings at the same time so that I kind of intellectualize it, right? So G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. And then I would say it down. G, F sharp, E, D, C, B, A, G. Then I would play it to see if it sounds right. Okay, that was good. Did anyone notice my tempo? Not fast, right? I want to be able to say the note names and then I want to be able to play them at the same tempo. So you go through your scales in that manner. And that's how you learn to memorize them. It's a combo of really repeating the notes to yourself out loud and do the fingering so that you can kind of clarify without actually playing the instrument, and then playing what you just named. And that will stick in your memory, and you'll have much easier time playing in keys because the knowledge is deeper. So it's not as hard as it seems, but there are a few things that make it stick, okay? When you're trying to memorize something, you need to touch it every day. If I play for 2 hours on a Saturday, and then I play the scale on a Sunday, I'm going to play it a certain way. If I had played the scale every day that week and played it on Sunday, I would know it so much better. So what you want is consistent practice every day of those same scales. Repetition, repetition, repetition. That's the only way you're going to be familiar with them. And the only way under duress, in other words, when someone's looking at you, you're auditioning for Allstate or you're auditioning for the youth orchestra and they're like, play the E major scale. And suddenly your brain it's all gone, right? You're like, and then what you tell yourself is, what's in the key signature? There's 4 sharps. Starts on E. And so if you've done that every single day and you've repeated it, hundreds of times over weeks and months, you will not forget that scale. If you read it off a sheet, you're going to forget that scale. And if you just cram right before, you're going to forget that scale. The only way to really know your scales and be able to deliver them when you want in a controlled manner is to repeat them daily, or at least every time you practice. Let's say you practice 4 times a week. You want to repeat them every single time. Let's say you learn 4 scales. Repeat those 4 scales every single time you practice. And then you can add your 5th scale. And then suddenly you have 5 scales. Okay? As an example, when you audition for Allstate as a freshman, all through high school, you have to play all 12 major scales, plus arpeggios, in under 2.5 minutes. So, in theory, you could play your scales in under 2.5 minutes if you learn them well enough. Done, right? So the real issue is how to get that comfortable with your scales. Okay? So I cannot stress strongly enough how important it is to touch your scales, play them every single day that you practice. Do not go straight to your piece. Go straight to your scales. So now that I've talked a little bit about how to learn your scales, let's assume you're starting to learn some of the harder scales. I want to talk a little bit about alternate fingerings. Now, every instrument has lots of keys, right? So most instruments have more than one fingering or way to play a note. On the clarinet, you can play a high G and there's 7 or 8 fingerings. And there's at least, most of the notes, not all, but most of them have a couple different fingerings. Now, when I work with kids, let's say I go to a band and work with their students, I often get the question when I describe what fingering to use for a certain scale. Well, I like this other fingering, and it works for me, so I don't want to try your fingering. The problem with that is that as a performer, I can see into the future. Okay, you can see what's happening now. You're playing slow, easy, accessible music, right? And everything's going fine. So you don't have any hard stuff. You don't have to use a different fingering because you can kind of slide to what you need. But what I see in the future is a lot of speed, and you cannot play certain things without alternate fingerings. So for instance, on the clarinet, now I know all of you don't play the clarinet, but each of your instruments has this same issue. If I want to play an E major scale, I start on E, F sharp, G sharp, A. If I play B the regular way, then I have to slip to C sharp, and then I have to get up to this note and get to E. Okay? Well, that's not good. I can't play, that doesn't work. So I've got to play B on the right hand, C sharp on the left hand, D sharp on the right hand, up to E. And then I can play, right? So what I often get is, why should I play a different fingering than what I'm comfortable with? And what you have to realize is that what you first learned on the instrument is not always the best way. It's just the first way. Maybe no one was showing you. Maybe you looked in a book and there were 3 options and you picked one. In other words, just because it's the first one that you learned does not mean it's the best, and it definitely does not apply to every situation. So as your scales get more complicated, you're going to need to be thoughtful. If you're sliding around and if something is really hard, there is another way. And you need to ask your band director, or you need to ask your conductor, or you need to ask your private teacher, or you need to find out from someone what is the best fingering for this scale. Because it gets really important as you get to 5 and 6 and 7 sharps. You're using all of your keys in all sorts of ways, which is why those scales are difficult. And so I really want you to understand that when someone comes in and says, you know what, use this new way, and you're like, but I can use it fine now, but I want you to look into the future and see when you're playing some really hard piece and you only know one fingering and you can only play it super slow, okay? So me looking into the future will give you the correct fingering, okay? So pay careful attention to the fingerings that you choose. So let's say I'm learning my scales. What do I do with them now? Well, there's a very important tool that once you become familiar with the notes, you feel comfortable, and you are able to stop saying the note names. In other words, when I ask for the G major scale, you just play the G major scale because you know it. The next thing is to bring in my favorite thing, the metronome. Isn't that beautiful? What a great sound. So for those of you who don't know, a metronome is just a timekeeper. You can look at it sort of like the police, you know? They're checking to make sure that you are conducting yourself in a positive manner. And the metronome is here to check and make sure that your rhythm is being developed, okay? Rhythm is not just something you have, it is something you can develop. And this will really help you develop that. This is an app called Tonal Energy. It's actually my favorite app. It does cost a little bit on the App Store. And you can get free metronomes all over the place. You can also get metronomes that are not a computer. Here's a Dr. Beat. It's ancient. You kids probably have never seen this. Or a small metronome. You know, they cost maybe $20 at the most. So you don't necessarily have to have an app, but the only problem with the apps is that it's not loud. So you really do want to be able to hear it. So this app has a lot of features, not only the metronome, but it also has a tuner, and it'll tell you when you're out of tune. So let's see, I'm gonna play a G. Let's see what it says. So it says I'm sharp. So I'm going to pull out a little bit here. And let's see, I want you to see what it does when I play it in tune. Sorry, this is kind of big. All right? It'll give you a big old happy face if you play really well. If you play really out of tune, this is what it'll do. Hold on. It gives you like a, what are you doing? Do you see that? I thought that was hilarious. And it also has an analysis. So it has this line, and as you play, you can see as you're sharper and flatter as you manipulate the pitch. So you can see I started kind of sharp. So this is very helpful, but mainly I use the metronome. Okay, and so what it does is it regulates your rhythm. So let's say I want to play a scale, and I've learned it. So you want to learn it first. and feel really comfortable with it. So don't use the metronome until you feel really comfortable with the scale. So I'm going to play a C major scale. This is at 80, so it has numbers that tell you the speed. And I would go into the math of it. A 60 on a metronome is 1 second. But you just have to kind of know. So I'm gonna play my C major scale with the metronome. And when I am able to do that, and I like the sound, I like the speed, it feels comfortable, I move up the metronome and I play it a little faster. And I'm able to fit my notes right in there, okay? And as I get better, I move that up so that my skill level goes up as the metronome, and I have sort of a reference. And it keeps me honest. A lot of kids, if they play without the metronome, everything sounds like a three-legged race. You know, it's like da da da. You know, you kind of get. Now that's a little extreme, but it really is everything to use a metronome. I can't, as well as repetition. I cannot stress enough how much the metronome will help you. You do have to learn how to play with it. So you can do little exercises in order to play with it. So when you first try it, you may have a difficult time fitting the information in. So just take the first little part of a scale. Maybe the first 5 notes of C major. So just try to fit it in, just one measure. My clarinet students, I give the young ones, I have a whole sheet of these little metronome exercises. But once you get it, it will actually over time implant in you a really strong sense of inner rhythm that you will need when you play more difficult things. So this app is great, but again, you can get free apps, but use your metronome once you've learned the scales. Now don't try to do everything at once, right? Once you're comfortable with the scales, then you start the metronome, and please start slowly. Another thing about learning anything really is that if, let's say you're trying to learn a scale and you miss a note, or you miss a couple notes, and then you just try to play it again and you miss the same 2 notes, and then you try to play it again and you miss the same 2 notes. You play it again and maybe you miss 1 note, and you play it again and you play it correctly. And then most students stop practicing there. They got it right? We practiced until they got it right. In actuality, you have just practiced it incorrectly 4 times and correctly once. When you can flip that over, and when you can play it 4 or 5 times correctly, then you have practiced the scale. So make sure that when you are learning things, that you are learning them correctly, and that you play them correctly more often than you play them incorrectly. I have several students that just, the moment they miss something, they take a breath and they try it again. But you have to, when you miss something or when it's not going well, you have to stop, examine what you missed, why you missed it, think about it a second, maybe say the note names, and then try again. Until you can play it several times in a row correctly, you do not know that scale. And maybe the next day you get that scale out and you still miss it. Again, every single day you're going to practice your scales, and every single day you need to get to a place where you play that scale several times correctly. Over time, even probably 4 or 5 days at the most, if you do this, you won't miss those things on the scale. And then you bring the metronome in and you build speed and agility, okay? Now let's say you've learned your scales and you are now using the metronome reliably. Now you can expand your use of scales to these exercise books, okay? Now they've got the scale on the top, so that's your basic tonality. In other words, that is the scale and the key signature that your exercisers are in, okay? So exercises are basically many different renditions of that scale and variations. And so, you know, playing your scales is great, but music is made up of scales, arpeggios, thirds, chords, interval, all this stuff, you know, and the scales are the basic Lego building block, but you are building something, you know. So let's take C major. I'm just going to play the scale. Now the first exercise here, and remember, until you know it really well and you play with the metronome about 3 months, do not play it that fast. You play slowly and with control. So now the first exercise in this book is a little triplet exercise, and it's based in this key. So it's basically playing with that scale. Right? And so once I learn that, then I adjust this appropriately. So I'm going to go a little faster. It's on 120 now. Right? And then if that goes well, bump it up a little bit. Okay? Now you can see how we've gone from figuring out the exact notes of a scale slowly, methodically, saying the note names, repeating it, playing it correctly several times, playing it every single day correctly over a long period of time. Then we introduce the metronome. We learn how to play with that. Then we start playing our scales with the metronome, and we start increasing our speed. And then we go get our method books out, and we start expanding on that, and we start doing exercises that are based on the scale. And then we bring out our metronome, and we start increasing the speed of that. And then maybe we add another exercise. So the next exercise on this sheet are these returning scales, right? So I start slowly. It's based in the same key. Great. Okay. Now it takes a while to do that, right? So step by step, you know, slowly figure out the notes, add the metronome. So let's go a little. So now I put the metronome. Right? And I'm going to increase that and increase my skills, right? So not only do I have the scale, not only do I have the triplets, I now have the returning scales. And then I'm going to go to the next exercise. Good. And then I'm going to start my metronome. I'm going to go down to 84 here. Right? And then I'm gonna increase it. Right? Because I could play that, felt comfortable, was even. I was playing with metronome. Right? So now, easy. I am building that building. I'm building that Baby Yoda Lego statue, right? I've gone from the basic fundamental building blocks, And I've systematically developed the skills to play much more advanced methods and uses of that scale. All music is made up of these exercises. Everything you'll play is based on scales, arpeggios, thirds, all of this stuff that are in these method books, okay? You can't get the basic idea is that building block. And that is why scales are so important. And you really cannot be a good musician without knowing them inside and out. And also without knowing a lot of these exercises. And without the metronome, you won't be a skilled player. The metronome instills in you a control and rhythmic integrity that you need to sound like you're playing something that's really easy for you. So I hope this video has been helpful. And I hope that your scales are something you look forward to, because they're so valuable, and the investment you make in them is really gonna give you a good return on your time and effort.